Beating you up here.
You'll see me duck out.
Okay.
10:40.
Hopefully we'll be done by then. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me see Mr. General Manager, Mr. Chairman. Hey,
Hi, I made it.
and we're all here, all right?
You give me just one.
We can switch if you'd like.
Go ahead.
That'll be good.
I'll watch it. Don't worry. It's probably,
I think we're all
you
here.
have
and
money
we can
anyhow, probably.
Start our briefing, and Shelley will come back here in just a moment. So you have some comments for us this morning, Mr. General Manager?
I do, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. We're starting the new year, so I guess we get to be a little rusty here a little bit. I did want to make just a few comments before we get into the main topic here, which is eFare, which is, of course, that, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge that a very tragic accident in downtown Hillsborough on Sunday night. We've sent you the information that we have initially on that, and just to note that, as always, we'll have a very thorough evaluation of anything that we can do to have prevented that. Sometimes that's not the case, sometimes it is, so we do want to wait for that very thorough review and evaluation. But meantime, of course, our sympathies and all of our good wishes for the family of the person involved. I would just also acknowledge that we continue to work with our operator related to our employee assistance program and the episodes of or the services available through our employee assistance. And frankly, we also make an effort to reach out in that regard to the crews that were responding, the TRIMET employees that were responding to that incident. So there's trauma associated on all sides with these tragic incidents, and again, just wanted to acknowledge that, and we'll give you a much fuller report as the investigation concludes. I did.
Yeah,
Hold on just a moment there. Joe, did you want to?
Yeah, I think maybe we should have a work session as a board, and I don't know the legality of it, but a closed session to discuss some of these things that have been going on. Accidents, etc.
We can
maybe we
certainly
can
do
have
that.
another approach, and as you know, a member of the board, I think that's something we need to address as a board.
Yeah. Be happy to do that. What I would simply, I would tell you my experience on these things, and I suspect of others, is that oftentimes the first reports you get aren't really the accurate ones. So my request would be just to wait for the full investigation on these things to play out, so that we really do know what the incident occurred. But I know your question was really much more broad.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I'm not
Appreciate
trying to,
that.
like, any blame or anything, no blame or anything else. It's just maybe some fresh eyes from the board ain't gonna hurt.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think our commitment to safety is paramount and our highest priority, as you know. So I think what he's asking is that, any accident like this is clearly preventable. Something I don't know what that could have been to prevent it. And so I think after you get your report, maybe it's time to just talk a little bit about, is there anything else we should do
Right.
as an agency, as a
Right.
board, to help deal with that. And so again, our thoughts and prayers are with the families, also with the operator who had to deal with this
All right.
at the site too. I'm sure it was not pleasant for anybody involved.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else? I'm sorry, Mr. General Manager.
I'll proceed then with our December ridership report, and just to note that we carried about 8 million trips, but system-wide we were down about 1%. The interesting thing about the numbers as we delve into them is actually peak hour ridership was up on the order of 4.6%. So it's really midday weekend ridership, which is reduced. And clearly this is, I think, one of the double edges of having a system which has a lot of choice riders, is that when gas prices are competition, gas prices go down, our competition's price goes down, there is an effect on our overall ridership. All that said, there were some also very encouraging signs. Max overall saw about a 7.5% weekly increase in ridership, 10% rise on weekends, and of course that's due to the Orange Line. There was a concomitant reduction in some of the bus ridership, down 6.1, and again, some of that was the switch of some passengers from bus to rail. And again, most of the off-peak bus ridership loss was really during off-peak hours. So again, just by comparison, last December, gas was at about 287. It was starting its trajectory down this year. It was about 246, so that's a pretty significant difference. And certainly savings help our budget, but nonetheless, that also affects people's individual decisions. We'll continue to watch these and drill down into these ridership statistics ourselves. We want to make sure that our service is as sharp as it can possibly be related to really attracting choice ridership. And it is encouraging that the peak ridership is not only holding up, but actually increasing as well. Next topic, unless there's any questions on that.
I guess I just comment, I think it is remarkable with the unbelievably large amount of reduction in the price of gasoline. So I think the numbers are remarkable in light of that. I know there's probably a lag time between price of gas and actual ridership, but I would think we would have seen changes, because I know in the past we've seen changes with 25-cent a gallon variance in the gas.
Right.
So congratulations. I think that means we're getting a service where they want it.
I certainly hope that's the case. We'll continue to watch that.
So is the increase in the peak ridership, is that primarily due to the Orange Line?
I would say that's what we're seeing right now, and I think although I think that if I remember the numbers, there was even a bit of an increase in peak bus ridership. Oh, no, excuse me, that was down just a little bit, but down less than 1%. And when you consider the switch from bus to max because of the Orange Line startup, that's pretty remarkable. So that does show, again, I think on the rest of the system, even peak hour ridership on the bus system seems to be increasing as well. I also suspect some of that may be response to, this is all speculation, but to congestion in the system as well. But obviously the road system is showing some increasing congestion, and we're certainly hearing that from both our operators and from our public, and from some of you this morning in the wet weather.
What are we talking about, huh? Please.
So let me also just make another note. We've shared this with the Finance Committee, but we have taken a compensation action related to sort of mid-year adjustments. And as you know, we've been seeing an increase in the turnover associated with our non-union employees. At the end of last year, it was about 13.5%. And again, I think this is a reaction to the increased competition in the labor market and beginning to see other opportunities. And again, noting that many of our employees are now Tier 2 or Tier 3. So essentially, there are no golden handcuffs to hold them here. It's really a compensation issue. And so as we looked at our non-union workforce, we found a number of sort of structural issues where a large number of our employees were under the midpoint of their employment range. And so based on that and based on the actual freezes that occurred during the Great Recession, we've taken advantage of some budget savings this year to reprogram about $260,000 that will be, I think, a small but meaningful change to those non-union employees who are performing well and are under the midpoint. Just to note that this would affect about 242 employees out of 425 total non-union employees. So it's not everybody, just those that are under the midpoint. And overall, it will not be a dramatic increase. If I remember right, we increased a little bit over 1%. The compa ratio, or the ratio between the midpoint of the employment and the actual salary. So it's a small, hopefully meaningful change to our non-union employees. I'd also note that this addresses another issue, which is the compression between our union workforce and our management workforce. And we continue to find sometimes it to be very difficult to attract employees out of the the union workforce into the non-union workforce because the wage rates are so close. So again, it's hard to give up sort of all the hourly benefits of the union in order, you've got to have some sort of a level of increase to get into the supervision ranks of management employees. So again, I think this is a very meaningful, small but meaningful change. You have materials circulated to you and actually will be posted on our website with the meetings materials today as well. So happy to answer any questions on that as well.
Dr. Bethel?
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. I was just trying to peruse this, not very good, clean copy. Makes it hard for young eyes to see. But my concern would be that if the survey, and it is substantiated here, shows that because of salary, we're losing a lot of people. The turnover is up there. I'm concerned about the other 200 plus who did not get anything at all as to how or what are we going to do to address, number one, if it's based on their evaluations and performance, how do we increase that so that they are eligible? And number two, and probably more foremost, what can be done to try to ensure keeping them if salary is becoming a criteria and is ranked as low as it is with TRIMET? That doesn't speak well for overall for this organization, that the pay is inadequate for non-union employees, that they do not want to stay, and yet in comparison to salaries of others, there is a big gap in there. So I'm betwixt and between on whether I want to congratulate this or pull back and say something else has to be done before this is fully implemented. But I suppose that this has already been done, and since it's public, but I would hope we do something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just perhaps in response to your question is that we still have the annual performance reviews and compensation reviews that do take into account where employees are in the salary range, as well as their performance. And so we do that every year. And so that will occur again this year, close to the end of the fiscal year, so that early, usually I think it's around August, that we actually, employees see the results of that process. That allows you to consider the amount that you budget for that during the budget process. This is a small increase that's available with current dollars that have been appropriated for salary in the budget that you approved last May. And so it's a small, again, step, but it's a stepwise process. And indeed, this is just trying to address those who fall under that midpoint. So there are those who are above the midpoint that are not affected, do not get the benefit of this, but just those who are below that market point. And again, so overall, it will only move the needle very slightly. But again, for some of the individuals involved, I think it will be a meaningful step that we care about them, and we really do want them to be fairly compensated, aligned with the market. I'd also note that we're taking a number of other actions over this last year that were really in line with our employee surveys in terms of employee satisfaction, because it's not just salary, it's also are people given the opportunity to grow? Are people feeling challenged? Are they contributing to the mission? And so we're taking a number of steps associated with that as well to sort of make this a great place to work overall. And I think most of our employees do feel that way, but I think what this is recognizing is that we may need to take some additional steps in the future. This is just one of those, but just to note, your point is well taken and right on the mark.
That answer your question? Yep. Other comments?
I
Questions?
do. One comment. I guess I'd want to continue to get reports on turnover rates to see if there are changes or if it goes up or down. That would be helpful for us to monitor.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll do that.
And I guess I'd just point out for people record, the Finance Committee did talk about this in quite a bit of detail a month ago. And obviously felt it was necessary that we want to make sure the full board knew what was going on. This is fully within the general manager's authority to do this. I think I think the group, and correct me if I'm wrong, felt that this was an appropriate step. We just want to be as transparent and open with what's going on as possible. And so this is why you have this before you. But I agree with the general manager that some of the changes we made with our retirement system, going to a defined contribution plan as opposed to the defined benefit plan, and it is going to force us to look more and more at our competitiveness of our base salaries and benefits more than we had in the past. So I think this is the right start. But you're right, we need to keep monitoring, and the budget is the next opportunity up for us to look at that. I agree. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
So, Mr. Board President, if I might, this allows us to, I think, transition to our main topic here, which is the eFare system, our Hop Fast Pass. Let me, as we introduce our stars here, who will give you this briefing thoroughly, provide just a little bit of context. Again, this is in preparation for first reading of an ordinance that you'll see at your January meeting and again at your February meeting, which will actually begin to implement into the TRIMET code the potential rules for the electronic fare system. And as you'll see, this is not the only time a change in ordinance will come before you, because there are some phasing aspects of this that I think are also important for you to sort of recognize and comment on at this stage of the game. And the reason that that's so important is that we're about ready to be at that sort of lock it down phase of software development. And so making sure that the board has adopted these rules and is comfortable with the rules where we are, rules of the road is important. The changes are actually relatively few and really focused on the eFare components itself. There are a lot of other things about the fare ordinance that may need to be changed or tweaked, but those are not associated, are really separate from the eFare system, as I think this presentation will begin to show you. The other thing that I just want to do is give you just a very quick update. In November, factory tests were completed quite satisfactorily for the eFare system. The next major milestone will be March, when we actually do integrated testing here in the region. And that will be sort of the next major milestone to see if we continue on schedule as we are right now. The other thing that I would just note is that we have some independent reviews underway that we'll be bringing back to the board for a briefing at a future meeting. That involves both the management and technical aspects of the development, and underway right now is an independent review of the security aspects to make sure that the personal information is securely handled. Again, just to reiterate, one of our guiding principles, and you actually have been implementing this gradually, is sort of a keep it simple philosophy. And that's why we've aligned some fare categories, we've reduced the zones, we've eliminated zones. All these things have really been part of the process of really aligning the fare system to be simple so that this implementation can be smooth, because it really is a major change in the way people use the TRIMET system. So I would say that you'll hear a full report on the outreach. I'd say just in a word, it went well. And I think right now we bring you a series of recommendations. May not be unanimous in terms of the community's review of those, but I think there's overall acceptance of the place that we are as a reasonable starting point for our eFare implementation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris, please, and perhaps you could introduce the rest of the.
Sure. If I could ask
Oh, yeah.
a quick question first. Anytime you implement a new software system, it's a very, very difficult job. And there's large chance for great difficulties. And speaking as one who's been involved in two different software conversions, one successful, one not, one of the things that just occurred to me as you were talking is, do we have a backup plan, or will we have a backup plan that we can fall back onto in case there is a problem with our final rollout? Now, we're doing all the right things to make sure that we don't have a problem, but it still is a possibility. So, is there a way to plan for, okay, if we roll it out and something really does go wrong, what's our backup?
So the answer is yes, and that backup is continuing the fare system that we have right now, the fare instruments we have right now. Matter of fact, you'll see in this presentation that what we would, this is an important ordinance for consideration in the next couple of months. We'd probably come back to you about a year after we attempt to roll out before we actually eliminate the paper products. So we'll have plenty of opportunity to phase it in, and I think that's another important aspect. Chris can go through that a little bit more, but the answer is, the question is, we don't want to be down the creek without the paddle, so
Yes,
to speak.
exactly.
So we want to make sure that we always have a system that works, and certainly the system we have works, and we can gradually transition to the electronic fare system.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Tucker.
General Manager. My name is Chris Tucker, Director of Revenue Operations. Good morning. This is Tom Strader. He is the Coordinator of Fare Policy in Public Affairs, and Jake War, who is an analyst in the Diversity and Transit Equity Department at TRIMET. So I'm looking forward to a comprehensive discussion, and the agenda we have, let's make sure this works. We want to go back to the basics for a little bit on why we're doing eFare, how the system works and the features and benefits. There's a few board members here who have not had the opportunity to hear these things over the last 4 years, so we'll go back to the basics on that. Tom will talk about the proposed fare changes as it relates to the ordinances that you'll hear about in January and February, and Jake will cover the Title VI analysis and process. He'll turn it back over to me for addressing the community feedback and recommended mitigations that we have in place. There'll also be opportunities throughout where we'll stop with a big question mark to address any other questions before we transition. So why again are we doing eFare? And Neil mentioned that we want to focus on something that is simple to use, easy to use and understand for customers and operators. This is a great opportunity to make a regional system where you can transfer from C-Tran in the streetcar and TriMet seamlessly with one card. We certainly have an opportunity to increase pricing equity with fare capping, which you've heard us mention before, and reduce paper fare leakage by electronically managing transfers. We also look forward to having equipment that's easy to maintain with no moving parts. This validator doesn't care if it's raining or snowing or icy, whereas our ticket machines have a difficult time in the extreme weather conditions. We also have an opportunity to reduce cash in the system and the costs and challenges associated with collecting millions of dollars in cash, $1 at a time. You can see a photo here. This was taken on the bus just the other day of actually tapping a validator. Now, it's not installed, but we put it on there to show you that as you board, you can see where that validator is located and that you get a very simple green check and accepted message. How the system works, again, we're looking for something that is very simple. I mentioned that it's great from a regional perspective. This is the fare board today that we ask our operators to validate within a half a second. As customers walk by with over 50 fare instruments, that's really text heavy with many other variations they need to look at. And it's somewhat mission impossible to do thousands of times a day. And this was one of the big benefits of moving to electronic system, not only at TriMet, but worldwide. Folks are moving to this system. And what you can see as far as it works is that a customer will acquire this card. They'll be available at over 500 retail outlets. They can load money to that card, and it creates an account in the back end. And then instead of having paper tickets that they're fumbling around with or having to reload and going to a grocery store every month, they can literally just set up the card, and then when they walk onto the bus or at a rail station, and this is a rail validator, they just tap the reader like this, and they get a welcome aboard. And it's that simple. So what you saw was about a half a second, and folks will do that over and over as they board in a line to make it very quick to board. And again, this is a big benefit for our operators, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, this is the card that will work, that anyone can get and use to add funds to. We also have riders that may be occasional riders, or they're coming in from out of town and they fly into the airport. They could even pull out a smartphone with an Apple Pay on it. It's basically a bank card on their smartphone, and they'll be able to tap that on the validator as well without going to a retail store or anything like that. In fact, it'll even work with an Apple Watch, so you can tap your watch and it'll light up the validator with the accepted message. So you'll see that there are many different ways to access the system, which leads to this slide. This hop card that I showed you is available to load funds many, many different and new ways that we don't have today. Today, the primary channels are the fare box on bus, the ticket machines at rail, and the retail stores. In the future, folks will be able to set up an account, and they could pick up a telephone or a cellular phone and just call and load money over the phone with a call center representative. Of course, we'll have the large retail network we've talked about before, and there will be a website that you can log into and add funds that way or manage your account. We'll also have the 800 number that you can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and reload information or trigger reloads or shut down your card if you lose it. There'll be a smartphone app, which I'll touch on in a minute. Of course, there's a TRIMET ticket office and other agency transit stores that Streetcar and C-Tran have. And this card lasts up to 10 years. So this is something that once you've got it and acquire it, you can use it for years to come. But in addition to this card, there is the new smartphone app. And this new app will be linked to this card and will allow you to load funds anytime, anywhere. We found with our current app that customers like to purchase their ticket as they're running to the bus stop. So things are becoming real time, as you can imagine. This will allow them to do the same thing. So they can just load money every day, and then they can tap the card to ride. On the horizon is a particular technology that we're very excited about. And that's the idea that you can actually virtualize this card, and you won't need a card anymore. You'll be able to use the app, and then you'll load funds, and you'll take your phone, and you'll tap it on the validator, and it'll take money out of your HOP account. And so that's a transit-only account linked to your smartphone, which is a little different than the bottom, which is, I mentioned, occasional riders may use Apple Pay, and that's just your personal bank card linked to a smartphone. So all of this is to say that there are many, many new ways to pay in the future. If folks still want to continue to pay cash as they go on bus or at rail, they can certainly do that. But this gives them many other ways to make it convenient to ride transit and make it easy for them. There are other things, such as a maximum you can load to the account of $250, which keeps their funds safe. They don't load too much on there. There are also many features for our riders, and of course it's the one regional fare system which I've mentioned. This allows for faster boarding. If you've seen folks struggle to feed change into the fare box or put money into the fare box on bus, that certainly has a propensity to slow things down. These systems, we found, do decrease cash in the system, therefore fewer people spending time at the fare box, which will speed up boarding time. You've heard us talk about fare capping, which is essentially the best fare with the 1 day and 1 month caps. Something that we heard from the community is that they were particularly, well, very interested in that. They also enjoyed the rollover concept, where if you don't use your funds, let's say you load $100 in December, but you take the last week off and you stay at home and have family time, you don't use that money and it stays on the account for January to use. So that concept of rollover was very popular. There is this notion of anytime, anywhere, so that you can manage your account via telephone or a smartphone or a website. We've talked about being able to reload at stores, automated systems, or the TRIMET ticket office. This is highly reliable equipment, which is a great benefit for riders. And there's also the notion of setting the account up in the back end and linking it to a bank card or a prepaid card, and you could just forget about it, and the system will automatically charge when your balance gets low. So some folks will be able to set it up and forget about it all year, and it'll just keep track of everything for them. Lost card protection was also seen as a significant benefit for riders. The community gave us great feedback that they're excited about this, that it really is an issue when they lose their paper pass, and that being able to block that account and transfer money to a new card is seen as a great benefit. And something I haven't mentioned a lot over the years is this streamlining of program management. Right now, you have institutions like Portland State University or large or small employers who do quite a bit of work to issue paper passes or stickers to their employees or their clients or their constituents. And with this program, they'll be able to manage all of those accounts for their employees or their clients on a website and be able to add funds to those to take care of their needs. I think a good use case, Portland State University is particularly excited about this. They do a term pass where every 3 months students line up outside of the store at PSU waiting to buy their product and get their sticker to put on their pass. And in the future, they won't need to do that. The Portland State University can virtually load that term pass onto the card. So once they acquire the card and they're set up, they don't need to go stand in line and get that loaded or sticker put on their card. So PSU continues to ask, when can we sign up? When can we sign up? We want to be one of the first. So that's just one example of an institution excited about being able to use this system versus a paper system we have today. We've talked about rider benefits, but there are also some agency benefits. Again, I can't emphasize enough for operators, it simplifies that big fare chart with faster boarding, reducing cash in the system, as that's is problematic, and this highly reliable equipment. And of course, there's also better data for service planning, which we look forward to that as well. And then, of course, we can have more information for future products and services that are easier to offer. I'm going to pause and open it up to questions.
Good. Perfect. So there's, thanks, Shelby. So there is capability physically and electronically for 10 years from now, if the next generation of technology, we don't have to revamp the scanning post or anything?
You mean if as technology evolves? Yeah, I would say that there's one really fundamental piece that has been built into our design, and that is we have a back-end system that has open program interfaces, which means that as new technologies come into place, and who knows what really those are even going to be, that we can integrate that with the eFare back-end system to give new channels or new ways to pay.
Okay.
If we have to update this reader, then of course we just replace the reader system-wide. Maybe someday we don't have readers. It'll be hard to tell for sure, but when we built this, Tim McHughes, our Chief Information Officer, is very visionary as it relates to how to create a system that can be adapted over time. And he's made sure that this was built in since day one. And we're seeing other transit agencies follow that model. So we can improve iteratively as technology evolves.
Okay, thanks.
Have we done work to find out what the percentage of smartphone users within our system, our ridership, is between, say, the choice riders and the transit dependent?
I'll give a quick answer and see if Tom has any other detail. I think the unofficial ridership is about 80% of riders now have smartphones. Our riders have smartphones. But a little deeper, I'll see if you happen to know.
Yeah, just a little bit deeper. 80% of riders say that they do have smartphones, and another 4 to 5% say that they're going to get a smartphone in the near future. That's about an 8 to 10% jump over the last year, and it's trending really very close to the national averages. We're a little bit above the national average by a couple percent points, which also saw an increase of about 8 to 10% over the last year. So that's very.
And I think we can infer that the lowest income may not have those smartphones. So there are studies to show that of course those who don't have it tend to have the lower income and likely are transit dependent.
Yeah, I can actually speak a little bit to that. So when we look at our riders who are people of color, we actually find very similar smartphone usage, or at least ownership of smartphones, as well as usage of the TRIMET mobile ticketing app. Low income, it's still a majority of our low income riders have smartphones, but it is lower than our higher income riders, but it gets higher every year, and that gap is lessening. But then even usage of the mobile ticketing app for low income versus higher income is about on par with one another.
Interesting.
It's interesting. Good question.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. One of the things that we have happened at some points is that our TVMs don't work. And that leads to a lot of issues, particularly when it comes down to fare enforcements and exclusions and things like that. Did I correctly hear you say that the weather will have no effect on those machines, that they will work?
Not those exact words.
Okay. That's why I said, did I hear you say? So what did you say? Because I will go back and look at the tape.
So there are no moving parts on this equipment. What fails nearly every time on ticket vending machines are the moving parts, which is the bill note acceptor and the coin acceptor and the printers that print the tickets. So as we maintain equipment and we find issues, I mean, a high 90% of the time, it's the actual moving parts that have failed. Because this doesn't have any moving parts, we're not going to find the same level of defects. And in fact, the reliability is expected to be 99.999% of the time because there is no moving parts on the validator themselves. However, things will still go wrong. Hardware does fail, even if it's just a little capacitor inside that may go down. And when that happens, while it will be fairly rare, we still have to change that out. And I would say that anything is susceptible. So I was watching the movie Hard Rain, as you mentioned, the water. So if we happen to submerge this thing in about 5 feet of water, we're done. But the reality of it is much, much, much more reliable and not the same that we've experienced with fare boxes and ticket machines.
I thank you for your 99.9. There is nothing that a human being has ever made that is that reliable. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that you're going to have to do something that when those things fail and people cannot validate, they can't get on, and then they're stopped, they're excluded, they're locked up, they're getting these felonies, you're going to have to do some work now in order to address that and not rely that 99.9% this thing is going to stay there. It's just not going to happen. And I would really encourage you, change that 99.9% unless you get it in writing and back it up with several billions of dollars worth of funds that are going to come from it. It's just not plausible. And I think for us to continue to put those things out like that, knowing the issues we have now that we aren't able to correct with vending so far, I'm just not comfortable with putting that message out there and backing it as a board member.
Yep. What I would note is that this is an additional piece of equipment on the platforms. And today, as you know, the ticket vending machines are the only source of ability to purchase. If someone were to find that this is down or not working, the one thing I would note is that every platform will have a redundant validator, and we did that intentionally so that if one is broken or someone hits it with a bat and they break that and we haven't fixed it yet, that there'll be another validator on that platform that they can go tap and use. It'll say that it's out of service or the screen will be broken, and they can use the other one. So not only is it a very highly reliable piece of equipment, there's redundancy. I would also note then, if for whatever reason both of them are down, they also have the ticket machine or ticket machines to use to purchase a ticket. So we've added, I guess, some additional redundancy with eFare, but that, to your point, does not address the fact that there will be times where the platform is down. Call it that the power went out for 8 hours in that platform and all equipment is down. That's absolutely possible. It's not related to the equipment, it's related to a commercial power outage. But those things will happen, and as an agency, it's important that we address the fair inspection piece of it. If the equipment is down and someone gets cited and it's at that station, we will have the records to state that the equipment was down, and it allows our fair enforcement to take a closer look at that citation, potentially void that out, which does happen today when there's citations at a platform with TVMs down. It doesn't address your concerns, but I just wanted to give you that additional information. And I think it's an agency initiative that we need to address.
And just to add to that, currently today, if there's a fare box down, there's a little sign in the operator's pouch that they put in that you ride free. So that is the answer really on the buses. When we have the occasion when the fare box breaks, we actually allow the riders to ride free. And that would be the case with this as well. And just to note that that we've had the SOPs related to that are being trained with our workforce as we speak. And as Chris noted, related to that fare inspection, currently if we have TVMs down, the fare inspectors get notified that that's the case, that this platform, this is down. So there's an attempt, it's imperfect, obviously we're human beings and we're imperfect, but there's an attempt to communicate those challenges that our riders face.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, this is the max. For buses, it'll be on the bus itself.
That's right.
Have we ever thought about, as an additional backup, maybe having these on the trains?
Very early on, we contemplated that. We have the privilege of having crush loads on our MAX trains. And what we found is that it makes it challenging for folks to get on and try to get to that reader when it's very busy. And also, we're concerned with slowing down the train as people walk by and one by one tap. The beauty of having them on the platform, and the intent is that they tap, then they get on the platform and they queue up, so that when the train comes, they literally walk in and walk out in 10 seconds or less. But if we did have them on there, there would be this notion of a single file tap as they go through the doors. I will note that Streetcar, however, is choosing to do that. They don't have quite the ridership crush that we do, and they have a lot of platforms and only a few, I think it's about 17 streetcars. So from a cost perspective, they're going to put 4 validators on each streetcar. So it'll be an interesting to see how that works. It's not totally uncommon, but it's different than how we're approaching light rail.
Can you talk about how fare enforcement is going to differ with this new system compared to the current system?
Sure. And if you'd like, I have a slide on fare enforcement. We could tackle it then, or I could answer it now.
We can get to it when you're ready.
Okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this section so far?
Good.
Great. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Tom and Jake, and you'll hear the goals for eFare adoption, some of the key concerns from the community related to the Title VI analysis. But I just want to be rest assured that as it kicks back over to me, I'm going to talk very specifically about how we plan on mitigating the issues that you'll hear from the community.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, members of the board. We wanted to spend a few minutes giving you a preview of the eFare ordinance that will be coming to you in January and February. This is really a fairly significant milestone for the project, and we're very excited to be able to bring this to you for your consideration. For this ordinance, we want to focus specifically on those items that are essential for eFare and to keep us on track for system development and implementation of the system. We would not be proposing to eliminate any fares or change any prices with this ordinance. It would essentially be allowing for the implementation of eFare, and I think that's a key thing to keep in mind as we walk through some of these specific items. The ordinance would establish, as I walk through these key items, the ordinance would establish stored value and fare capping for 2.5-hour tickets, 1-day passes, and 1-month passes at the levels that you see on the slide for adult, honored citizens, and youth. And the key thing to keep in mind here is that these prices are in line with what we currently offer today, so there's really no change to the fare structure for those items. The ordinance would establish a card fee at $3 and a minimum load at $5, and we'll have a much more thorough discussion about both of those points as we get into the Title VI analysis, as well as discussion of additional potential mitigation strategies later on. As Chris mentioned, customers will have the opportunity to pay with other financial instruments such as contactless bank cards, Apple Pay, Android Pay, using a smartphone, and these will be allowed to purchase 2.5-hour tickets and 1-day passes or caps, but not monthly caps. For lift fares, consistent with the current fare structure in place today, a 1-month pass or cap would be $74 and a single would be $2.50. There is no day cap for Lyft, just consistent with what's offered today. There is no day pass offered for Lyft paratransit service. And then there would be a couple of housekeeping items. For example, the ordinance would update and allow us to introduce contactless fare media for group pass programs, where the language right now is specifically specifically targeted to visually identifiable sorts of fare media, like little tiny stickers that we put on photo ID badges. This would allow us to start transitioning to electronic fare media for some of these programs. Ordinance would also update Chapter 29 of the fare enforcement provisions to allow inspection with a smartphone, and also update some language related to definition of proof of payment that would be needed under the eFare system. It would differ a little bit from what we offer today with visually inspected fare media. Again, these are the items that are really necessary for implementation of the eFare system. And while this ordinance would not eliminate any fares or change any prices, we would expect to come back with additional ordinances down the road to help facilitate that transition away from some of our current paper pass and ticket products. So this chart is really intended to show conceptually how that transition process might look over time to get us to our long-term eFare adoption goals. And I'll start kind of at the end of the slide where we've identified a 75% adoption rate goal after 5 years. And we think that's reasonable based on what we've seen at other properties that have gone through this process and what we know about our own market. So that's kind of the goal that we've set out there at year 5. If we come back to kind of present day eFare launch, this is essentially what the ordinance coming to you in January and February would establish, allowing us to begin that transition process. At this first increment, the difference between what we've kind of presented as a lower range and a higher range is really the ability to phase out and sunset some of those current paper ticket and pass products. For example, some of those things that we currently offer at retail outlets that account for roughly 30% of our rides. We think that if we have success there, that we can be closer to this 50% adoption rate and on par for this higher trajectory to get to our long-term goal over that 5-year period. From this point, if we can get to around 50%, we need to average about a 5% growth rate over the following few years to get close to that 75% rate, which we think is really achievable. At that 75% rate, the difference after we've seen cash significantly reduced in the system, to move that needle further might require additional policy lever that we would come back with potentially another fare ordinance. For example, eliminating cash fares or revisiting that policy for cash fare transfers. While that gives kind of a longer-term perspective, really the near-term action that allows for the launch of the system is coming back here with the initial ordinance. So let me pause there, see if there are any questions.
I'm not seeing anything. This is pretty complicated though in terms of just understanding. I guess I do have one question. So when I look at the getting rid of the paper, I look at some of our other transit agencies around the United States, like for example Washington D.C. I mean, you essentially have to buy a disposable card up front to use the system, right? I mean, so it's essentially the same type of system in terms of the use, saying you have to buy it right up front, be able to use it, in the same way with other systems that I've ridden on. So this doesn't seem to be anything new in terms of kind of just the general usage of how people will use a system than what's going on in a number of large transit districts around the United States. Is that indeed the case? Yes. Okay. Everybody understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think when I look at this, the idea that the desire would be, frankly, to get rid of as much paper as possible, as quickly as possible. So how do you? I guess I'm looking at how do you actually start making the decisions, in 12 months and 18 months or 24 months to actually move towards that upper line? What's the threshold things that you guys are thinking of that would be the metrics that we need to hit to actually be able to get to that? Or have you thought about that yet?
To get there, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest opportunities will be in the retail stores. What will happen is they'll continue to carry paper tickets and passes, but then they'll also have this hop card hanging in their gift card area, and customers will naturally start buying and using and loading this, and we'll see sales start to drop off pretty quickly in the retail stores because there are so many benefits with electronic fare. As far as that threshold, I think we're anticipating roughly a year timeline to see those the tickets and passes drop significantly. We'll have to evaluate what the threshold is based on kind of public feedback. But if once we remove it from the retail stores, of course, there could still be other channels. They get those paper tickets and passes. The idea is to slowly roll those out in maybe about a year or so. We would maintain the transfers on bus, and that's really contemplated more like several years out in a third ordinance. But what you'll hear from us is, roughly a year after launch to come back and consider removing paper fares, and at that point we'll have a detailed analysis on our thought
Okay.
process.
Okay.
Your projected participation rates look easily achievable. And it raises the question in my mind, if our participation rates, in fact, are higher sooner, would that open up the possibility of accelerating some of these other changes? I'm thinking with a ridership that's 80% smartphones now, I would think, getting 50% participation in 12 months would be very easy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we in fact get, say, 75% in 12 months, would that say that we should accelerate the full transition? So,
Yeah, I think our answer would be, yeah, we would like to see that happen. This is a pretty rough ballpark of 5 years. It's difficult to really predict where we'll be, and we're modeling after what other agencies experienced. This market and with smartphone technology could be vastly different, and we really hope that it is. We don't want to overshoot. We want to be what we think is realistic and conservative. I think to your point, if we reach that much quicker, then we probably should revisit and see what other policy levers we might want to consider.
so it's really that the implementation schedule is not as much time-driven as it is participation-driven.
Absolutely. And I would note that one of the most important drivers will be removing those paper tickets and passes. Today my cell phone carrier may have great offers that I don't know about because I don't watch TV and I don't read the junk email they send me. So I don't really know what's out there, but over time I'll call and what's going on. But of course, if they remove the existing option and say, here are the new advanced features, then of course I'll migrate a lot quicker. So migrating folks, some will just jump to it because they see the benefits, but some will continue doing exactly what they do today. They'll go to the customer service counter and buy a monthly pass until the day in which that pass is no longer available and the clerk says, hey, did you know that HOP is right over there and you can reload it anywhere? So that will be that's what will create that big jump, is that elimination. What we've seen from other transit properties is when they do not change fare policy at all, and they take exactly what they did before, and they continue offering the old system and the new system, adoption rate is very low because customers don't see a reason to change and make the mental transition. But removing those paper products is a big one.
And I'm sorry, maybe I missed this. What does convert TVMs mean?
Go ahead.
Yeah. We would have at some point down the road, an opportunity to transition our ticket vending machines from the current paper visually inspected products they offer now to a chip card. And Chris can speak to the timeline on that, but that's essentially replacing the current visually inspected flash pass media with a chip card, as well as eliminating a couple of the pass products that are available from ticket machines, including 7-day passes, 14-day passes.
Right, because I thought at a previous meeting we were told the TVMs it would be too expensive to convert them to generate the HOP cards. So what would they be selling at that point?
That's a great question. And when he says a chip card, it's a disposable chip card. In other words, today we issue paper tickets, and they're dumb pieces of paper. In the future, we would issue something that is similar to this, but it's basically paper like a business card, and but it allows you to electronically tap and write and manage those transfer times. That's the contract which was approved a few months ago. The idea is that by early 2017, we will start converting ticket machines to stop issuing paper and start issuing the limited use media where you can tap to ride. What the ticket machines wouldn't do is issue a reloadable card where customers would go to a ticket machine and add cash to those cards. And in fact, there's a slide on that I'll be talking to as well, because the concept of reloading TVM certainly came up and something we wanted to be very clear on in our discussion today. Does that help?
Yes, yes, and so that this conversion of the TVMs, that sounds like what you see like in the Washington D.C. metro system, where you
Indeed.
get a one-use or limited use piece of paper.
Yeah. I think in Washington D.C. is it a mag stripe where you slide it?
Yeah.
And for us, it'll just be a tap, but it's the same concept.
Okay, thank you.
Please move on.
All right. Well, good morning, President Warner, members of the board. Some of you probably associate me with a lot of data, and in this case, I'm actually going to be pretty data light, but I'm going to go over our process that we've undertaken to try to make sure that as we implement the eFare system and the related policies, that we do so as equitably as possible, that we are considering potential impacts on our low-income and minority riders. And so the way that we do this, at least under our federal compliance mandates, is through Title VI. And for some of you, this will be a refresher. For the new board members, perhaps this is an introduction to Title VI. But in its simplest form, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 said that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. As an agency, we receive a decent amount of federal financial assistance. Even if that was $1 of federal financial assistance, we would still be under the regulations of Title VI. So that's the simple version, but how FTA actually implements Title VI gets a little bit more complicated, and how we comply with that has a few more details. So in terms of our Title VI compliance, we submit a Title VI program outlining our policies every 3 years. Our last submittal was in 2013. So with a little bit of complicated math, you can figure out that this year we'll be submitting another one. And what that program entails is it includes all of our policies related to performing equity analyses, which we are required to conduct anytime there's a major service change or a fare change. And that program includes how we define what a major service change is. It defines what a disparate impact is, how we would find a potential disparate impact, which is a disproportionate impact on minority populations, or a disproportionate burden, which is the same concept but applied to low-income populations. The key thing to keep in mind with an equity analysis is that it's not looking for any impacts. It's looking for the disproportionality of impacts and how those affect minority and low-income populations, for better or worse in terms of benefits or negative impacts. So how we go about conducting this at kind of a high level, you can see on this flow chart, so if there's a fare change, as eFare is, then we automatically look to the potential impacts on minority and low-income populations. If we find that there are any disproportionalities, any disparities, then what we essentially look at is how can we avoid, minimize, or mitigate those impacts. Or if we choose not to avoid, minimize, or mitigate, what is our business case for not doing so? What's our justification? Are we really implementing the least discriminatory alternative because of a certain business case? So in this case, with eFare, it applies as a fare change because all fare changes, whether it relates to price, whether it relates to fare media, or even transfers, those are required, an equity analysis is required for those, and this falls under that. So for our specific process that we've undertaken over the last over a year, We partnered with a consultant who is a DBE, and they started off by conducting a peer review of similar agencies who have transitioned to electronic fare systems and therefore had to conduct Title VI analyses. Some of them there was Caltrain, LA DOT, UTA, Pierce Transit, and using those peer reviews as well as our own TRIMET Title VI policies, developed a methodology to say how we would evaluate the policies associated with eFare for their potential disproportionalities, if there were any. From there, we conducted we produced a preliminary equity analysis report that was based on data. It was based on survey data that from our onboard fare survey we conducted in 2012. That was produced in January 2015, so about a year ago. And that really guided our community engagement process, which included obviously connecting with our Transit Equity Advisory Committee. They've been involved for quite a while now in focusing on eFare. It's been quite a hot topic for that committee. I'll get to some of their input and recommendations a little bit later. But also we partnered with community-based organizations to conduct some really targeted outreach to minority and low-income populations to try to get sort of a feel for on the ground what switches to this system might do for current riders. And then all of that led to an equity analysis report, which is in your packet, that we just finished up early this month for your review. So in terms of the...
I got a question, just
Sure.
quickly. Ballpark numbers for minority and low income, just combined?
As far as our ridership?
Yep.
So our ridership in terms of rides taken is about 42% low income, if we define that as 150% of the federal poverty level, so about 42%. And rides taken by minority riders is about 27%.
Okay. What's the number combined? Not percentage,
The number.
ballpark.
So if we're talking 300-something thousand rides every weekday, so doing some quick math in my head, so 42% would be about 120,000 or so low-income rides, and then minority would be about 75, 80,000. If I did that correctly?
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
It's close enough.
All right. So moving on to our Title VI community engagement, we partnered with 6 different organizations to conduct discussion groups. Those organizations are listed there on the side. And we held 7 meetings over the last couple months throughout the TRIMET district, all 3 counties. And these meetings consisted of really educating the participants on what eFare would entail, what the changes would be from how they pay fares today if they chose to participate in eFare. And all in all, we had about 140 constituents and staff participating. You can see that photo there was from a meeting at the Center for Intercultural Organizing in Beaverton, which we held 2 meetings there, and they were perhaps our most diverse meetings. We had people from all kinds of backgrounds. We had 5 different languages with including English, and so we provided interpretation services. We had refugees, we had people from all age groups. It was a really fascinating conversation, and throughout that, as well as our other community meetings, we really feel like we got a pretty good sense of how the community is perceiving this eFare system and what they like and some of their concerns. So in terms of the data that we analyzed that informed these meetings, those terms, the disparate impact, disproportionate burden, in looking at the data, we tried to look at really in terms of the percentage of rides, comparing minority and non-minority, as well as low income and non-low income, how those differences might be with different policies. So we didn't find any Title VI issues from the data associated with eliminating fare media by mail, by increasing to 500 plus retail outlets. In other words, we found that access to those outlets was actually better on the whole for minority and low-income populations. We found that the new fare caps actually benefited minority and low-income populations more so than others, potentially. We found that with the elimination of the 7 and 14-day pass, no Title VI issues because of really those have not been utilized very highly at all since implemented. And then with under the data, we found that the $3 card cost, as long as we keep cash transfers in place, didn't have any associated disproportionate impacts. I will note that at our community meetings, that was a topic of concern, especially for families in purchasing multiple cards, and we'll get to that a little bit more later and how we aim to address that. So now the three areas where using the data we found some potential Title VI concerns were the first two there, the automatic reload option and the accepting contactless bank cards. Because our low-income and minority riders are less likely to have bank accounts, we found that those features were not as likely to be adopted by those riders. Now, there are alternatives to accessing eFare, and those were not huge concerns in our community outreach, but we flagged them anyway based on what the data told us. And then finally, the $5 minimum load requirement, we did find some potential issues because minority and low-income riders tend to use fares that are less than $5 more so than others, more so than other populations, that is. This was not a major concern in our community outreach. Most folks said, yeah, that we can afford $5, that seems fine, but there was some advocacy actually amongst participants at these meetings saying, we feel like it's affordable for us, but there might be some really low-income folks out there who that is a big barrier. And I would say also in relation to the minimum load, it was for families was another key point of concern, and saying, yeah, maybe $5 for one person is not a big deal. For families, it might be more of a barrier. Again, we're going to address what we plan to do in response later. So the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, as I said, has been stewing on eFare and talking about it and having a lot of conversations over the last probably year and a half. And overall, the best way that I feel like I can summarize their input is that they're supportive of eFare and they want to see this system, they want to see us progress into the 21st century. However, their main input was they want to ensure that as we implement eFare, that we do so in a way that's going to be successful and it's going to be equitable, as you can expect. So some main ideas that we've talked about as a committee are, first, security of personal information. It's probably no surprise to some of you that there are concerns in the community, especially say amongst undocumented persons or refugees or people who have limited ability to speak English, that what we're doing with that information or what we're doing with the ability to, say, track ridership patterns in aggregate can be a little bit scary for some. And so there are concerns that we make sure that we're clear about how we will be using that data, how secure it will be, et cetera. And one point that came out of our conversations was that mental health care providers in particular, their clients might be especially sensitive to a system like eFare. If they are paranoid about government tracking or collecting of information, we need to engage those mental health providers and see how we might address some of those issues with them for their clients. Secondly, language and registration barriers was a major topic for TIAC. In ensuring that all people in our community have access and know that they can access eFare is really important. And for those who may not know that you can call our customer service and have access to interpretation in 120-something languages, a Somali refugee or immigrant might not know that that option's available. So education towards that is going to be really important, and assistance in registration so that folks can get the benefits of eFare is going to be crucial. Perhaps the biggest focus for the committee was how do we incentivize uptake of eFare? How do we, our chair, Roberta Hunt, puts it nicely. She says, how do we get people on the bus, and how does this get people on the bus? And so some ideas that they threw out to get us towards that were, first, the idea of packaging some of the costs of eFare. So if we're saying that there is a $5 minimum at retailers, one idea that TIAC had was, could we offer a product through the retailers that is $5 or maybe even $5.50, but includes that $3 card cost and comes with a $2.50 ride on it already preloaded, so that we're still getting those retailers the $5 minimum price point that they're wanting to see, but we're making it a little bit more palatable so that it's not $3 for the card plus $5 minimum and then multiplied by however many people you're buying it for. So that was one idea that they proposed to consider. The next was really addressing affordability for low-income families, and this was a very common theme amongst our community outreach. How can we make it so that eFare is accessible for families who might have multiple people traveling together? An idea that was commonly floated was that of a family pass, and now that's not with our current system, the way that it would be set up. A family pass doesn't really work with fare capping, because as you can imagine, if you hit a maximum on a day, then if you had it as a family pass, you would be able to, it would cap out the amount you're spending, and so then anybody would be able to board, no matter how much you tapped it for however many people. This was a concern that I heard from some folks at MBTA in Boston, who they have it so that it's not one card per rider. They have it so that you can do multiple fares per card, and they are trying to figure out if there was any way that they could do fare capping, and they haven't figured it out yet because they really want to be able to do that. But still, there might be other ways that we can address affordability for families, and they really emphasize that. And then the idea of having a sort of safety net that allows riders to go into the negative. Perhaps one ride was an idea that TIAC put out there. At this time, the system we're proposing doesn't include that feature. But the idea is that if, say, I found myself with zero balance on my card and I'm not by a retailer or I'm in a hurry or something, that I would still have that sort of one ride forgiveness and still be able to board. Now, I should note that in that situation, I'd still be able to pay cash as we're proposing the system. Still be able to pay cash, still get a transfer, and that we don't currently do any sort of negative, balance right now. But that's an idea that they definitely wanted to put out there for your consideration as we go forward and implement this system. Employers were an important topic as a way to increase access to eFare. We are planning, of course, on engaging employers and recruiting employers to participate in eFare. And TIAC was really supportive of that idea and really pushed us to do as much of that as possible, because if there are any gaps in, say, the retail network or accessing eFare, people's employers providing them with those cards and with those products might be a way to address some of that. And then finally, this gets to some of your point, President Warner, about how do we evaluate at what point we would phase out paper products. TIAC really wants to be involved in setting up program evaluation, at least consulted on how we might evaluate at what point it would be appropriate to propose eliminating cash transfers, for example. In particular, they would be sensitive to looking at not just overall market penetration, but penetration amongst specific populations. So they wanted to put that out there as going forward as we really move along through this eFare process. So with that, I will pause for questions before turning it over to Chris, who will address how we're looking at tackling some of these issues.
Covered the issues.
On slide 21, where we talked about no disparate impact or disproportionate burden. The $3 cost with cash transfers maintained.
Yeah.
So as long as we maintain cash transfers, we're okay. What does that say about down the road when we want to go to a cashless system? Will the impact be more pronounced then? And therefore it becomes more difficult to go that direction?
It's a good question. What I can say is that says that we would need to conduct another Title VI analysis if we were proposing to get rid of cash transfers. And I mean, it's speculation as far as who would still be using those transfers at the time. We would need to look at the specific riders who were still using them and determine if those are disproportionately low income and people of color. And if we proposed still going forward with eliminating cash transfers, we would need to look at some mitigation options for those riders to ensure that they are not unfairly burdened.
Okay. Second question, TX's interest or raising the issue about the security of personal information, and particularly as it relates to law enforcement issues. How would I know as a former city person, when the Patriot Act came in, and the whole issue with libraries and the confidentiality of library records, that was a big issue. And so I just wonder, this seems like this would be even a bigger issue. And how would we deal with that? Is there a way to deal with that?
I think I'd defer to Chris to talk a little bit about that and how, what sort of access or law enforcement would or wouldn't have, and what sort of protections are on that information.
Because any type of ridership information that we have, I'm assuming, is public information under current law.
Yeah, I do have a slide that will touch on this.
Okay.
But in a nutshell, we went to the legislature to exempt eFare records from the public records law. And we were successful with that a few years ago,
Okay.
Which means that it protects the data of the public and it's not subject to that public records request. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that customers will choose to stay anonymous, meaning that they don't need to provide any information to TRIMET to enjoy the benefits of the hop card and the fare capping. They can go to the grocery store, pick off the J-hook, add cash to it, and ride the system, and there's no name or association to that card for that person. And we believe that that will be a very common theme, and we've seen that in other agencies, that those who are concerned about privacy just won't register. But in the slide, I'll talk about further mitigations that we're taking to address those who want to register and remain anonymous, and we think we have a solution. But once I get into that slide, you may have follow-up questions.
Okay.
I have one very simple one. The $3 cost for the card, my assumption is that's our cost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the cost to manufacture and distribute and get sold in the retail stores.
Do not see any other questions. Keep moving.
Okay. From the project kickoff years back, based on peer feedback and focus groups, we wove in mitigations for low-income and minority communities, and wanted to bring that to the attention now that this was something that was considered throughout project development. Fare capping and lost card protection are fundamental to, and what we've heard is the analysis confirmed that fare capping is a pretty big benefit for low-income and minority communities. We worked hard to reduce the card fee from $3.50 to $3. Obviously, retaining cash transfers on bus, we've removed that from current consideration so that we will continue to support cash transfers on bus for the foreseeable future. And we knew that expanding the retail stores would be critical. So of course that was a big part of the project from the beginning. eFare card registration not being required. This was something that initially the system was designed to require an email address to support the information of taps and all of that. And through community feedback, we were able to find a way to not have an email address necessary. And they can call us and just create their own user ID, if you will. And we can still consider that registered. They can give us a name. It can be a pseudonym, which I'll talk about in a bit. But we worked really hard on this registration process because we think it's a big benefit, and we think people will want to enjoy the benefit. But we also know that many people don't want to provide any real information to tie to them. And then, of course, very early on, there's consideration for, and what other agencies have done is they've raised the price of their cash fare to make electronic fare more attractive. But we've decided that we want to keep the cash fare and eFare prices the same. So those were early mitigations, that we've put into place today, that we plan on putting into place. But we've also heard additional community feedback, and we wanted to touch on that. So this slide is just a summary of that feedback from the community, which you heard from Jake, of where there may be some concerns or areas we should focus on. The minimum reload, this card fee or family card idea, eliminating paper tickets and passes, fare enforcement, reloading at TVMs and retail deserts. I'm going to take each of those slide by slide and spend as much time as we need to on these. The minimum load, while found to have impact based on the analysis, the community feedback was pretty minimal related to that being a concern. We can speculate that part of it is that today if you go to a retail store, the minimum that you would spend is $25 to buy a book of adult tickets, or $12.50 for a book of youth or honored citizen tickets. And in the future with eFare, you'll be able to walk in and load $5. So it's actually a more attractive option than we have today for low income. But we also know that we're going to continue allowing pay-as-you-go. So you remember the chart that said we want to get to 75%, but we're still leaving 25% of rides not transition to eFare. And that's because we think there's going to be some more difficult to transition that last 25%, and they will continue to pay as they go. So if they find that the reload is a barrier, they can continue to pay as they go, one ticket at a time on bus or at ticket vending machines. But one of the key drivers of electronic fare is that customers today, if they buy a day pass and they lose it, they lost $5. That cost of a card is only $3, or the minimum load is $5. So there's a pretty big benefit to switching to get that balance protection as it relates to the minimum load and card fee. And of course, we expanded the retail network significantly. So as it relates to the minimum load, I think we're feeling pretty confident that this will be an issue for a few people, or a small percentage of people. But if it is, they'll continue to pay as they go. And for everyone else, they'll continue to take advantage of the retail stores and other channels. For the card fee, or this family fare concept, as Jake mentioned, this was a major focal point of the feedback we heard from the community. While it didn't actually have Title VI implications from an analysis perspective, it did based on the community feedback. The card, I think what it boils down to is that $3 is something they don't have to pay today. They can buy a paper pass for $100 and they don't have to also pay for the paper. But the card will last for 10 years or up to 10 years. And it's important not only to cover the cost of the card, because that is a big operating cost, but it's also important to note we've learned from other agencies that if you don't put any value on the card, folks will just throw it away. When I get a gift card, I use it and then I give it back to them because I don't really see a point in keeping it. It's the same concept that other agencies have seen, is that there needs to be some value so that once they reload it, once they've used it, they'll keep it in their wallet and continue to reload it instead of just getting another card and loading money. As it relates to the family fare, Jake mentioned, we don't have a family fare today. It's an interesting idea to be able to share a fare, It's not something we do today, so what folks do is they buy passes for each of the members of the family to ride the system. You'd also note that the pricing is different. So an adult fare is $2.50 and a youth fare is $1.25. If you had one fare on one card, it would need to charge you a rate of, say, $2.50 every time you tap, and then you're not getting that discounted youth fare. So when you package this card fee and family fare, it's operationally very challenging and confusing for customers when you have fare capping, which was seen as a very big benefit, and people were excited about that. But they were concerned about the initial outlay to buy these cards. And I think you're going to see that's a focal point for us as a potential mitigation that we'll recommend in a few slides, is that initial card fee or even an ongoing card fee is a concern. A low-income family of 4 now, if they went to a retail store and they were to buy a book of youth and a book of adult tickets for the spouse and the 2 children, they're going to spend $37.50 today at a retail store. With eFare, if you couple the card fee and the fares, you'll spend $32. Of course, then once you've purchased the cards, it's $20 every time you reload. So it's even less than it is today, but again, the community feedback was still that this is a concern. Registration was interesting as it had preliminary concerns that had to do with internet access, language barriers, and personal information protection. Early on in the development of eFare, and then based on community feedback, we think we've addressed this, and essentially what customers can do is that they can provide a pseudonym, so just any random name. If they want to be Daffy Duck, they can be Daffy Duck. But they also will provide a 4-digit security PIN that only they would know because they provided it to us. And if they want to not have an email address, because there are some folks who don't have internet connection and or an email address, and they would be able just to call us and provide information over the telephone, and we would be able to register the information they give us. And that would allow them to, if they lost their card, they could call us and say, hey, I lost my card. What's your name and what's your security PIN? And we'd be able to block that card for them and transfer it over. There was also additional concerns just about the security of the information, which we understand and appreciate. That's very important. I talked about the legislation that we passed so that it's our information to protect. We've gone through extensive work to keep the system secure. As Neil mentioned earlier, we're also having a third party assess the security of our information. When the information is stored in the database, it will be encrypted, which means it's not human readable. And so we've gone through great lengths to keep it as secure as we can. But the third-party assessment is really, we're looking forward to the results of that to hear how do we do and were we effective at this, or are there other methods that we should be considering. And very early on, there were many agencies who require youth and reduced fares like Honored Citizen to register. In other words, you can't just go to a retail store and get an Honored Citizen card off the shelf and start using it. They would require you to go to their transit store, like the TRIMET ticket office, to then register and show that, yes, I'm 17 years old, or yes, I'm an honored citizen, and then they would validate it up front, and then they would hand them the card. Very early on, we had concerns that that would not work well for the low-income minority populations, especially those that want to remain anonymous. And so we've very early on decided we'll leave those cards available in the retail stores. So again, that's something that gives customers the ability to just get the cards and run. The eliminating of paper retail tickets and passes, it just really wasn't an area of concern when we talk about eliminating paper tickets and passes from retail stores, which is great. We have this goal of 75%. We mentioned that we think it's achievable. Seattle has been at this a little over 5 years since their launch, and they're just at about 70% adoption. If that gives you an idea for where they're at and where we're at. But we think with fare capping and being able to use bank cards and having all these other reload features, not requiring registration, which they do, we think that the system will be easier to use, and that's of course what we've been shooting for from day one. For fare enforcement, I think it's important to note that how we approach fare enforcement isn't changing because of electronic fare. In other words, fare inspectors still randomly inspect fares on rail systems. You still have a bus operator looking to see if it's accepted or not. And the only key change is that today they use a mobile app or a mobile phone to inspect mobile app fares. In the future, they'll use a mobile phone to inspect all fares. So if you have a card, the fare inspector will just hold it to a smartphone. It'll tell them it was tapped 10 minutes ago. You're good, accepted. But customers can still choose to stay anonymous. They don't have to register the information. There was also something that Jake mentioned about this notion of going negative that we heard. So I thought this might be an appropriate place to talk about that. We don't currently have a system in place to allow folks to go negative. And what that means is that if they go to a ticket machine and they put in 50 cents, they just can't buy anything. If you go onto the bus and you don't have a fare, then you don't have a fare to ride. But all of that doesn't change with electronic fare. If you tap it and you have a red light, you'll do what you do today. And that can be a million different things. Some might go get a fare. Some might ask the operator if they can ride. Some will just pull out cash and put cash in the fare box of the TVMs. So with eFare, we're suggesting that we just keep the same process in place, noting, though, the concerns with fare enforcement, generally speaking, not just because of eFare, that we want to tackle. A question came about reloading at TVMs or ticket vending machines at rail stations. We did hear very few concerns about not reloading at TVMs, but it was certainly desirable. So having the option was desirable for the public to be able to load at ticket vending machines. We talked in the past about the business case of that, and essentially what we have is a very small population of riders. It's the low-income cash-paying customers that pay as they go, being about 2%. And they'll still be able to do that at a ticket machine. They'll still be able to buy their pay-as-they-go ticket or day pass at a ticket machine. But where the business case gets very challenging is if we have the ticket machines allow reloading, which draws a lot of people to the ticket machines to put their cash in there. And the business case is really, if we were to convert a ticket machine to issue and reload this hop card, it's about a $3 million upfront cost. But that's kind of the smaller of the issues. The bigger issue is the ongoing operating cost. So the example I put into here is that for every $20 million in revenue that goes through a ticket machine, the agency spends about $4 million to support that. For every $20 million that goes through a retail store, the agency spends about $1 million. So it's a significant shift in cost. And I'd also note that there are even lower cost channels, such as online and auto load. Those are the least expensive channels. But the ticket machines are the most. We've also added many new ways to pay. So as we mentioned, you'll have this ticket machine, but you'll also have the validator and the hop card and all the other ways to do it. But we were generally pleased that this doesn't seem to be a key issue of the community. And what we'd like to do is keep an eye on it as we roll it out. How much is this impacting adoption, not allowing reloads at a ticket machine? Retail deserts, that's, I don't think that's an official term, but something that has bubbled up over the last few months. We did hear a few concerns about it in the community-based organizations. Most of them saw a map and talked about which stores, the locations where you could reload. And it seemed to be really solid coverage for folks. They understood that they would have access to these stores. But what I thought was really useful will be the next two maps. There's a current map of what our retail network looks like today. And what you're going to see on here is a bunch of green and purple blobs of color. And essentially what this is showing you is that with our 125 retail stores today, all of those colors are showing you areas where there are low-income or minority populations that are more than a mile from a retail store. Their bus stop is more than a mile from a retail store. And so there's quite a bit of issues with our current retail network. When we launch the new retail network, and you can even kind of focus on up there in the Clark County area, there's a lot of green and purple. When you go to the next map, you get a better sense for what that coverage looks like under the 500 stores being added, and that the retail deserts shrink significantly from where we are today. I would also note that when I took a close look at these retail deserts, some of these cannot be solved with a retail store. They're in heavy industrial areas where it's literally a road with industries, and that's it. Now, hopefully, we'll have success recruiting those employers to issue cards to their employees, because that's likely who's riding over there in heavy industrial. And there are also a few areas that are just a couple of miles of just housing, and there's no convenience stores or anything for us to build to. But I would note that there are several in here that do have retail stores that we're not currently in or plan to be in. And so we've worked pretty hard to get Plaid Pantry on board. And it looks very promising. Plaid Pantry is excited about it. They have 100 stores throughout the region. And I'm not seeing any significant barriers to adding Plaid Pantry. And so if that is confirmed, then we can update this map to show Plaid Pantry in here. But based on looking at the information, it addresses many of these as well. So I've said a lot and gave you a lot of material. If I were to summarize it, it would be that the $3 card fee was seen as barriers, particularly for family. There were some concerns about the reload of $5. There were minimal concerns about reloading at TVMs, yet it was very desirable. And no concerns about eliminating paper tickets and passes. We did hear key support for fare capping, stored value, particularly having the money roll over, the retail network being expanded, lost card protection, free cards initially, anonymous registration, and continuing to support cash transfers. So the concerns we hear seem to be more of bumps than barriers, but still things that we want to address. This was just a quote from the community. They said, I really like this. I like it especially for the low-income people because they can't sometimes afford a monthly pass or a 2-week pass, and this has a cap on it. When they come up to the amount that would be a monthly pass, they don't have to pay anymore, and I think that's wonderful, which we agree with. So the early mitigation slide, you've seen this already. It's just a reminder that we did do quite a bit of work early on to mitigate electronic fare. We heard that from peer agencies, but we thought it was worth mentioning again. And then where are we at with recommendations? And this is the last slide. So based on the analysis and the feedback from the community, here are some recommendations that we think is worthwhile. The community feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but we think 200,000 free cards initially would be a good investment. That would be 115,000 cards for the general public, especially targeting low-income minority populations, and 85,000 free cards for social service agencies, schools, and employers. We think that's going to help get over the hurdle of those low-income families who have several children and don't want to pay the $3 or can't pay the $3. We also think it's worth considering free cards via the Access Transit Program funding, whether that's a temporary or a long-term mitigation, so that there are free cards available throughout those for those organizations, which I believe it's up to about 100, you said, organizations included in that. We're recommending that we maintain cash transfers for the foreseeable future. We also can remove a minimum load from the TRIMET ticket office, so that if folks want to top up there, they can add whatever denomination at the TRIMET ticket office. And of course, continuing to look at how to improve the retail network and expand it wherever we possibly can. What we're not recommending at this time is reloading cards at ticket machines, the $2.50 minimum load at retailers, or lowering it, or coming up with a new family fare or family card concept. So I think with that, we've carefully weighed the business case and also the community feedback, and that's where we've landed thus far. Of course, the goal is to get to 75%, if not more, but we know that we're going to learn along the way as we roll out eFare what other levers do we need to pull. So thank you. We're here to answer any questions.
We have some other questions. Dr. Baumann, was this helpful in terms of the for the new members and the
Very much so, yes, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
questions or
You know,
thoughts?
I haven't fully thought through this question, but I'm just thinking of tourists are so important to our economy. I'm not sure that, what's the best route for a tourist? To buy the $3 card and go ahead and load it, or what would you recommend?
I think they're going to have a lot of options, and we'll probably see them take many different paths. One is, of course, when they get to the airport, they would be able to just buy a ticket at a ticket vending machine and ride with that. So they buy a day pass and they ride. Another option is that they'll be able to use Apple Pay or a contactless bank card that's in their wallet or on their phone. They'll be able just to tap and ride, which we think some folks will do that. We are also looking at adding a couple of machines at the airport specifically for this notion that they would be able to get a hop card and add money to it and then add value to ride the system there. So we're still working out the kinks with that one, but we think that's important for the tourists at the airport. And of course, once they have a card, then they can load money online or through a mobile app or however they want to use it. So we think we'll probably see a variety of options that they'll take.
Following along on Lori's question, I hope we'll also have, I can see like a information kiosk at the airport, at the train station, at the bus station, explaining all of this for, at the point of entry. But I would also hope that we could have some information, flyers or posters or something to make available to hotels, lodging places for their guests. And I think if we do those two, and given the variety of ways to pay, I think that really covers it.
Yeah, they're great points. We do have some hotels today that buy fares in advance, and then they give those to their guests as they arrive. We think that this system allows the same benefit where they can get cards and give them to the folks who arrive. Bernie's group is looking at how do we refresh the airport information kiosk as it relates to electronic fare. So I think that we'll hopefully address those, but take those comments back about making it very clear as they arrive at the airport, how do they play and how will it work. And then I know that there's be significant outreach for the information and flyers at hotels, but realistically, we're still working through the plan, and so we'll weave those in, make sure that those are part of that outreach plan.
Yeah.
Perhaps just to expand on Chris's explanation, we do intend to come back to you, and I meant to mention this in the introduction, with a full briefing on the marketing information program in the broad sense. We know that that's a really big issue. Will require a certain level of investment, both in the next budget and the following budget. So again, that will be a topic in front of you in terms of sort of future briefings. But I'd also just want to note that getting the rules in place are really the basis for that. And then that allows us to begin that development work with our ad agencies and others to make sure that we have that broad community-based outreach that we know is going to be absolutely essential to make this successful.
The free cards, I don't understand that. Is that you get a card and then it's up to you to put the money on it?
Yeah.
And 115,000 for the general public, does that mean people who low income?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, there's,
minorities,
do
okay,
you want to
minorities.
touch on a little bit of the analysis there?
Yeah, sure. The intent really with that number was to cover a majority of our frequent riders, our regular riders, as well as our low-income riders that ride essentially at least once or at least more than once a month. And so we looked at a variety of data sources. We looked at current pass and ticket sales data, and we looked at population data, as well as so we could drill down into income status and how often they rode. And so that kind of gave us a ballpark as to how many free cards would reasonably be required to cover that vast majority of those two markets.
Thank you.
Martin, did you have any?
I think you guys have really done your homework, and I really appreciate what you've answered all the questions before I was able to ask them, so I really appreciate your due diligence.
And I guess I just had one question. So as a result of the privacy issues, we're not going to ask people for verification to make sure they can get a card at a senior rate or a youth rate. in essence, we're putting that back to the fare inspection program like they do today.
That's right.
And if somebody gets checked, they will still have to provide the fare enforcement officer proof that they're either an honored citizen or a youth, as an example.
Exactly.
Okay. Great.
So Chris, how will that evidence itself, for example, on the bus, just for example?
Yeah, when you tap the validator, it'll say accepted, but it'll also say ID required in yellow. So it's an indicator that you still need to carry the ID. When you tap on bus, it'll say the same thing, accepted but ID required. And so it gives a flag to the rider and the operator or the fare inspector that this is a reduced fare. They don't even need to see that it's a youth card. They'll see that evidence when the bus operator sees it come across their screen.
So it'd be up to the bus operator to determine whether they wanted to ask for ID then or
That's
not?
right.
Okay. And clearly the same way with the fare inspector?
Yep. Yeah, so it's the same now. If they have a youth fare and they flash it to the operator
Exactly.
may ask them to show proof of age or eligibility.
Okay. Well, I think you guys have done a great job of bringing us up to speed, and I would like the second one I've heard around here is good presentation, and I on behalf of the board, I think we really appreciate the outreach you folks have made with the communities out there. I do want to remind anybody watching this that what I've heard to say is this will be on our agenda for first reading as an ordinance on January 27th.
That's correct. First reading and public hearing.
And that's what I'm going to point out. And so it is a public hearing, so people who want to provide input to us on the very issues we're talking about today, because the ordinance will be drafted with these assumptions, which I think what you're hearing as a board is comfortable with moving forward, and we'll look forward to hearing from the public about their thoughts and concerns before we take action on it. And just remind folks, we can't take action on the ordinance at the first reading. We'll have to, again, wait at least till the next reading. And if there's any significant changes or changes made to the ordinance, we'll have to, again, have another reading and then carry that on until we get to an ordinance that's acceptable to the board. So, did I say that properly?
You did.
All right, thank you. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you had a figure up there of 140 people who came to these community groups, with staff included, right?
Yeah, a few staff.
Okay, that makes me really nervous. Out of all the population we're talking about, it's not, 0.0 something. And it's not there's no blame or anything else. In this town, it's like AA. You can always find a meeting to go to, and you're always getting pushed to go to a meeting. I wonder if there's anything we could do as an agency, say with the social service agencies and schools and employers, especially the social service agencies which have a more of exposure or work with the low income and minority populations. So they don't, more is better to me. Say, this is what we're trying to do, So when it gets rolled out, like Craig said, it's one more problem we may not have. People can say, well, I didn't know about this. And then, even though we're right, we're wrong. So,
Well,
if you can.
I would just note that this was, again, a very targeted, focused outreach to people who are low income or people of color.
Right.
And so, we have done some other outreach and focus groups on the whole concept of eFare as well. But again, it's really hard to do that very broad outreach until we have the rules of the road that we can share with people and then begin to say, well, how does this work? And so that's why I would say that this is a little bit iterative, which is that we need to establish the rules based on what we've heard from focus groups. And again, the really important part of this is that when you start these focus groups, there's a real focus time, just like we did this morning, on educating people how it works, because that's not in everybody's mind right now.
No.
So first of all, you have to say, how would it work? And then you can begin to assess the issues that people might have with it. So again, that's why the focus group approach has really been, I think, the effective and probably the only way to get real feedback here. And by that, there's going to be some limited numbers. But again, we'll have some chance to refocus that and learn as we advance our conversation on our marketing efforts over the next year or two.
in my organization, this happens a lot, and we're going to change these rules that's coming. They're going to be posted. We'll just send you a letter out with all the changes. Inevitably, inevitably.
I agree.
So
I might jump in that this is a standard problem, particularly
I don't disagree,
public
but I'm
agencies.
just.